Hello, composers! As usual, we'll start this week by providing feedback to classmates from last week's pieces. This week, we're going to look at the ideas of repetition, musical symmetry, and creating patterns, and when to break them. These are great ways to get a lot of material out of a minimal amount of effort, and will help you in particular when you're working to create textures and accompaniment figures later on. Pretty important. Let's start with the easiest one, repetition. Repetition is simply doing something once and then doing it again. So, if I have a clip in Ableton Live of the intro to Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, I can play it and then play it again. Straight repetition is a perfect copy of the original. The same pitches at the same rhythmic value. But that gets old really fast. Even Beethoven changes his idea after the original when he repeats it. This is an example of repeating the rhythm while changing the melodic notes. In musical terms, this is what we call an isorhythm, a repeating rhythmic figure that never changes, even as the pitches that play it do. Closely related to this is the idea of isomelody, where the pitches used and their order stay the same, but the rhythm in which they're played back is different. Here's an example using the notes C, D, F, and A. And to answer your question before it's asked, yes, you can combine isorhythms and isomelodies together. If I don't do that, but leave just the isomelody and random rhythm, I get this. But I can combine them and use that to create different musical lines. And no, they don't have to be the exact same length. If your isomelody has more pitches than the isorhythm, you just start the isorhythm over again. Then, when you hit the next isomelody, continue the rhythm while changing the pitch. It's a little hard to do, but it is doable. Here's an example with our 4-note cell of C, D, F, A, and a 3-note isorhythm of quarter and 2/8. So there's our isorhythm, and there's our isomelody. Here's what happens when I play them together. It's kind of interesting, but it would be more interesting if it weren't an arpeggio. Here's the similar thing going to another isomelody, this time an arpeggiation of E, G, and B. Now, I'm going to use the same isorhythm of quarter and 2/8. Note how this remains constant even when the isomelody has changed. But in this case, the isomelody and the isorhythm sync up at the same time. Every time I play the note E, I also play a quarter note. Closely related to this idea of repetition and isorhythm or isomelody is the idea of symmetry. You can approach this either rhythmically or melodically. To create rhythmic symmetry, you need to end where you start. So if your rhythm is quarter, eighth, eighth, you need to then have eighth, eighth, quarter. Pretty self-explanatory. Create a rhythm, then play it backwards. Melodically, you can do this as well, but it's not the most fun. What's more interesting is to pick a note in the scale that acts as an axis of symmetry. Every pitch you move up from that note is mirrored by a note moving the same number of scale degrees downward. So if I use C as an axis of symmetry, and then move up to D, I also have to move down to B. Then jumping up to A, I'd have to move down to E. Moving the top down to F, I'd also have to move the bottom up to A, and so on. Let's play this as simultaneous notes. This can be done tonally or chromatically, counting white keys and black keys to include all of the accidentals in the 12-note chromatic octave. You can move around this axis either by jumping up then down, or by playing these as chords. Either way will work. It gets very interesting, though, when you decide that one pitch is not enough for an axis. What if instead you use two pitches, like A and B together? So there's my axis. So if I start off on C and G, then move outwards, I get some interesting things. And playing around with that axis will allow me to avoid some dissonant intervals by using either two notes that are adjacent or by occasionally just using one note. Of course, if I want to up the dissonance, I can also pick an interval for the axis of symmetry, and then everything will be arranged around that interval. Again, play around with it. You'll find that it can be very fun and also very, very good at developing interesting ideas.